Hi, my name is Keegan VanLeeuwen, and I will be presenting on an econometric approach to validate the effects of the 2002 Winter Olympics. There has been recent research that suggests mega events such as the Olympic Games do not generate any economic return. And that is where I want to step in to perform econometrics on a very specific mega event, the 2002 Salt Lake Winter Olympics. So, just some background on the Winter Olympics that were held here in Salt Lake. They were held in February in 2002 in Salt Lake and Park City mainly. The investments for the games began back in 1989, and that is a similar strategy that most cities have when trying to win an Olympic bid, just because they need to build all the venues and the stadiums before winning the actual bid. And in Salt Lake's case, they won the bid in June 1995. The estimated direct costs were 2.5 billion, which are some of the lowest of any Olympics in the modern era, and it is one of the only Olympic games that generated a surplus. So you might be thinking the 2002 Olympics were a major success. However, a financial surplus and economic improvement are much different things. There has still been a lot of research that suggests that the Olympics, although may be profitable, they can tear down economies for years to come. Starting off with Olav Spillings, he did a econometric project on the 1994 Lillehammer Winter Olympics, and he suggests that hosting mega events such as the Olympics has implied unreasonable connotations for smaller cities like Lillehammer and Salt Lake, that they would receive enough attention and investment to power their economies for years to come. Robert Bott and Victor Matheson also do a study on the risk reward relationship in their Going for Gold, the economics of the Olympics, where they study the amounts invested required to host for the Olympics. And they imply that only large economic bodies have the capability to generate economic returns due to the established infrastructure. Stephanie Jasmine and Wolfgang Maying did a similar econometric project for the 1972 Munich Summer Olympic Games, where they found statistical significant results for employment and income effects, but could not prove any causal evidence. Andrew Wallman's dissertation of the 2002 Winter Olympics creates an econometric model that predicts income and employment effects. He finds between 25 and 35,000 job years were created from the event. However, he does not look at long-term impacts. Finally, the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute issued Utah's Olympic Economic Legacy last year, which is publishing detailed effects created by the Olympic themselves. However, none of these effects had counterfactuals. Using econometrics, I will specifically use a certain type of regression model, difference, which is an OLS regression technique that attempts to mimic an experimental research question by only using observational data. The goal of D&D is to differentiate effects of the treatment group from the control group that would have happened in a natural experiment. To expand my findings from previous papers and to diversify from previous research on Salt Lake itself, I have narrowed my research down into three categories: employment effects, residential real estate effects, and taxable spending effects, in which I will try to focus on long term impacts with an emphasis in construction. Since I am hypothesizing that Salt Lake's economic landscape is different after hosting the Olympic Games, my regression models must create an environment that suggests would have most likely happened to Salt Lake if the Salt Lake Olympic Games were never held. In order to create this type of environment, counterfactual cities and counties must be used. The research will mainly focus on two areas of Utah that were directly affected by the 2002 Winter Olympics, which include Salt Lake City, which resides in Salt Lake County, as well as Park City, which resides in Summit County. I've identified several counterfactuals for both Salt Lake City County as well as Summit County based off parameters which include distance away from Salt Lake City or Park City, proximity to ski resorts, population size, industry types, and the ability to host ski snow sport functions. In order to prove the statistical validity of the counterfactuals, correlation tests between the counterfactuals are ran in time periods outside of our interest of measure. So, to start off our first effect, let's dive right into employment. Employment is a common economic factor that can be used to interpret the economic stability of a certain city or region. Using the BEA employment data, the D&D regressions will look for how certain sectors of the employment changed in Salt Lake for the years leading up to and after the 2002 Olympics. Specifically, the regressions are designed to look at the following employment sectors: leisure, accommodation, financial activities, service providing, and construction of buildings. Monthly total employment data was gathered between June 1990 and May 2019. The employment section is targeting effects in Salt Lake City and using Boise and Denver as counterfactuals. The dependent variable in each of these regression specifications will be the quotient of the MSA's employment in that particular sector of interest and the total non-farm employment of the MSA. The quotient is then multiplied by 1,000 for interpretational reasons. The independent variables of the regression specification begin with a host dummy variable, followed by the time and location fixed effects. So, looking at Salt Lake's leisure employment industry, leisure employment are establishments that are involved in producing, promoting, or participating in live performances, events, or exhibits intended for public viewing. They also include recreational activities, leisure time interests, amusement, things like that. So, after controlling for time and location fixed effects, we see our regression suggests Salt Lake saw a statistically significant decrease of 6.78 leisure employees per 1,000 non-farm employees after hosting the 2002 Winter Olympics. The interpretation of this coefficient may not seem surprising, as it could suggest this type of leisure employment peaked heavily during the 2002 Winter Olympics. And what we can see is if we look at that peak of Salt Lake in 2002, we can see that no major trends seem to be forming once that short-term peak is omitted. Now looking at the share of construction, during the preparation for the 2002 Olympic Games, Salt Lake was involved in several large construction projects, which included the East Center, the Olympic Oval Ice Skating Arena, and they improved the interstate system and also expanded the University of Utah's Rice-Eccles Stadium and upper campus dorms. The construction employment regression follows a slightly different model specification than previous employment models. Rather than searching for impacts after the 2002 Olympics, the construction model is focusing on the time period of construction itself, which began in June 1995 when the Olympic bid was awarded and ended in February 2002 when the Games were officially held. Therefore, the construction host dummy is equal to 1 in the construction period for Salt Lake observations and equal to 0 if otherwise. With a statistically significant coefficient of 2.274, the construction model suggests that Salt Lake's construction employment increased 2.274 employees per 1,000 non-farm employees in this time period, keeping all else constant. As we can see in the graph, the blue line represents Salt Lake, and we do see a larger gap spread between Boise and Denver in that specific time period. Now we can jump onto real estate effects. Real estate factors can be powerful economic indicators hinting at how successful certain markets are performing. Several months ago, I found a very interesting article that showed large events like the Super Bowl have had large impacts on real estate prices. So why not the Olympics? No other research has looked into residential real estate prices after hosting a mega event specifically for the Olympics. Now, the real estate regression model will attempt to calculate if the 2002 Olympics influenced any changes to values of homes in Salt Lake County and Summit County after the Games. Indirectly, this model is evaluating the increased level of demand for houses in both Salt Lake and Summit counties after the Games. The model will be using Zillow data of median value per square foot to represent home value in each observation. The host dummy variable is identical to the employment model, as it is equal to 1 for observational data in host counties in the time periods following the 2002 Winter Olympic Games, and equal to 0 if otherwise. In addition, the model will control for the number of housing units to regulate any supply changes to the market, which would obviously affect median price. Here I have identified the different counterfactuals for both Salt Lake City and Summit County that will be used. Salt Lake City will be using Boise, Denver, Ogden, Utah, and Provo, Utah as counterfactuals, and Summit County will be using Pitkin County, which is home to Aspen, Eagle County, which is home to Vail, and Root County, which is home to Steamboat Springs. Now we can see in the Salt Lake regression, Salt Lake real estate is attempting to measure the impact to median home values in Salt Lake County due to the 2002 Olympics. And what we can see is during this time frame, we can assume these areas were in a metropolitan growth phase, which would explain positive coefficients for housing units on median home values in all the regressions. In addition, separate regressions were also executed, which exclude Salt Lake and Weber counties as counterfactuals. Delivering separate results that exclude these counties could give more accurate interpretations, as Utah and Weber County may have also received secondhand benefits from the 2002 Olympics. The coefficient that interprets the median value per square foot in Salt Lake County decreased by $7.55 in the years after hosting the Olympics, keeping all else constant. After omitting both Weber County and Provo, we can see that this number jumped to negative 35. The results propose that real estate growth in metropolitan areas may not be affected from hosting world mega events. Jumping over to Summit County, the real estate regression model is identical, as it is attempting to measure the impact of values in Summit County in the years after hosting the 2002 Olympics. The model interprets a statistically significant decrease, just like in Salt Lake, of $35.28, which is around 15.5%. And what we can see is this leads us to believe that maybe effects in real estate prices aren't always tied to mega events like the Olympics. If we look at the graph, we can see that the Colorado counterfactuals increased much faster compared to the blue line of Summit County after the 2002 Olympics. Hosting the Olympics can also bring quite a bit of buzz into a particular region, but it is unclear if that buzz translates into investments. Total taxable spending is an economic indicator representing the amount of income spent into a geographical area that can be legally taxed, mostly through sale and property taxes. The following regression models will use taxable spending from the Utah and Colorado Department of Revenues to indicate if total spending and investments grew inside Salt Lake and Summit County due to the 2002 Olympics, as well as use this indicator to understand if the construction industry had significant spending prior to the 2002 Olympics. The regression model's dependent variable will consist of each county's observed taxable spending, whether total or construction, in distinct time periods. Each regression model will consist of a treatment dummy variable, equaling 1 for host counties in time periods that reflect the interest of the experiment, and 0 otherwise. In addition, panel data for population will contain any spending that can be correlated to population growth. Looking at total taxable spending between Denver and Salt Lake, we can see a large increase in Salt Lake, as it is attempting to measure any substantial changes to spending in Salt Lake in the years directly after the Olympics. Looking at the model, we can see that the host dummy variable shows that taxable spending in Salt Lake County increased 10.4% after hosting the 2002 Olympics, keeping all else constant. The regression results suggest that Salt Lake County exhibited larger amounts of spending and investment inside their economy up until the 2009 from hosting the 2002 Olympics. These results can advocate the financial return of hosting the 2002 Olympics may be larger than previously anticipated. Total taxable spending regression suggests Summit County increased 23.3% from hosting the Olympics, keeping all else constant. Looking at this graph, it is clear to see the peak of taxable spending in Summit County begins to converge with the peak of the larger county Eagle directly after the 2002 Olympics. These peaks represent winter seasons where most of the taxable spending related to the counties would occur. It can be interpreted that the 2002 Olympics may have created a boost in total taxable spending up until at least 2009 inside the economies of Summit, Utah, and Salt Lake County.